Hi, welcome to the Second Line Show. I'm Nola Nash. Let's let the good times roll. To the Second Line Show. Please make sure that you are leaving your comments down for us with all of our authors to answer, to kind of get to those questions as we can. Make sure that you have given StreamYard permission to use your Facebook profile. If you have not, then we will not get your name with your comment. We'll just get Facebook user, and we like to know who's here. So as you're leaving those comments down below, go ahead and give StreamYard that permission, or if you don't want to do that, totally fine. Just put your name in your comments so we know who's joining us tonight. We are having a fantastic week. See what I did there? We were working with some fantasy authors this week, tonight and tomorrow. We had so many want to join us for our fantasy show that we made 2 nights out of it so we could get everybody in. So I hope you join us both tonight and tomorrow night. Same time, same places. So keep an eye out for that post going up tomorrow so that you can join us for tomorrow night's show as well. So as always, we are going to start by introducing all of our authors, but we do want to make sure that you know that you are welcome to comment right along with us. So I'm going to go ahead and let our authors introduce themselves to you. We're going to go Brady Bunch style. We always go around in the circle. So we're going to start over here with Randy. Randy, go ahead and tell the folks a little bit about yourself, sir.
I'm Randy Welch, and my book, Cold Covers, was the first book I ever wrote, and it has not just supernatural, but it's thriller, mystery, romance, all inclusive, and it takes place in upstate New York at a cabin on a lake where there's an Indian legend, and the guy that's staying there, he's heard about the legend, and he's decided to investigate, and everything starts turning out weird for him, even the townspeople, and he falls for the girl in the cafe romantically, and I kind of divide it up in the present, plus I go back in the past to the Indians, and how this all kind of meets in the middle, with the legend around the lake, and what all happened with a mysterious Indian girl and her medicine man father and a white wolf that materializes here and there. So it's a good read, and everybody's begging for a sequel to it because I did leave some things open. So I'm getting the itch to go back and review it all.
Sounds good. And Randy, you're joining us from Louisiana, but you've been between Louisiana and Texas. So we've got Joyce here, who's joining us from Arlington, Texas. Thought I would put her hello in here since she is joining from one of the states you call home. So thank you so much for joining us, Randy. Susie, we're going to throw it to you and let you introduce yourself to the folks. Tell us all about yourself.
So great to be here tonight. Thanks for having me. I'm Susie Vidori, and I am the author of The Fountain series, which is a young adult fantasy series. The Fountain is all about 16-year-old Ava, and she moves from San Francisco to New England to find out more about her mom, who died when she was 10. And when she gets there, her reputation's preceded her because her family had gone to the school, and the kids aren't very nice. And all kinds of crazy things happen to poor Ava. She gets really upset. She runs into the woods. She finds a mysterious fountain, kind of like the one on this cover. And she throws a coin into the fountain and makes a wish that one of the girls that she just met at the boarding school had never existed. And when she returns to the school, the girl is gone, and absolutely everything in her whole life is different. Even her own family has changed. And she has to find out about the magic of the school that she goes to and the history of her own family. She meets the boy. There's a romance in it. It's a mystery. It's lots of fun. So these books have been twice nominated for an Aurora Award, which is Canada's premier science fiction and fantasy award. And I'm super proud of them.
Awesome. Those sound like so much fun. Kind of like a butterfly effect thing going on there. Just the coin and the fountain.
Wishes and the whole series was like super fun. I'm a former operations professional, so my brain like explodes when you try to piece it all back together. I love it.
I love that too. That sounds like so much fun. All right, we're going to toss it over here to Elizabeth Chatsworth. Tell us all about yourself, Elizabeth. Oh, hang on, Elizabeth, we can't hear you. You're off mute. Don't know what happened there. Try it again. No. Hang on. Are you there? Whoop. She's gone. We'll let Elizabeth come back in. Hey, there we go. Okay. Nope. Still. Maybe go on out and come back in. I'll keep an eye out for you. We'll let you go last. Sometimes that happens. I don't know why. All right. So we're going over to V.S. Holmes. I'm going to let you tell us all about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I'm V.S. Holmes. I'm a sci-fi fantasy author. And since we're talking fantasy, I am the author of Smoke and Rain, which won a New Apple Literary Excellence in Independent Publishing Award in 2015. That's a mouthful. I don't think I've had to say it out loud before. Yeah, it follows the people caught in the crossfire between the gods and the creatures that created them. And there's a sort of cosmic war going on, and it follows them and then their powers and the people who inherit their powers. So that's me.
That sounds fascinating. I love anything where you're pitting the faulty gods against the people down below and the people have to struggle. I love that. I love that. That's
my bag.
I think it's great. And I was reading the synopsis of all of your books today. And, Annie McDonald, when she does her interviews individually, we love Annie. Annie's resting tonight, but, hi, Annie. We love you. She'll always watch later. So, hello. But Annie always has the opportunity to read the books of the authors that she interviews. But because I do this show weekly and I have so many authors on, not possible. But I love reading those synopses and kind of building my list of all of the things that I want to read. And I got to tell you, fantasy is more my bag than it is Annie's. And I'm like giddy over all of these. I'm like, these all sound fabulous. So unfortunately, my list just got a whole lot longer. Thank you guys for that.
It's the right problem to have.
It is a great problem to have. I'm excited about that problem. Elizabeth, I think we can hear you now. Do you want to try it again?
I will. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right. Great. Not at all embarrassing, but anyway, here I am. I'm Elizabeth Chatsworth. I'm a British author and actor who currently lives in Connecticut, USA. And I'm the author of The Brass Queen. Now, The Brass Queen is the underworld name of my alternate Victorian age heroine, Miss Constance Haltwhistle, who is keeping her ancestral estate running by selling ray guns on the black market. So she's a bit of a card, and the Brass Queen is her underworld alias. So by day, she tries to be a very fine, upstanding member of society, and by night, she's selling these weapons. And she gets drawn into a search for a missing invisibility serum with a tall, dark, and almost handsome US cowboy spy called J.F. Truesdale. And the Brass Queen tells of their adventures through steampunk Sheffield, which is my hometown in Yorkshire in England.
I love that. First of all, putting the steampunk into Victorian England, I love that so much. And the names, fun names, the names are so great. Yeah. What a fun story with everything from ray guns to Victorian England. It's perfect. Yeah. Love it. I know, what a combination and adventure and so much fun stuff. Andy, we're just kind of going around here, going down the line. Andy, tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, Nola, thank you for having me. I'm in between New York and the Bay Areas where I live. My fantasy novel is a little bit driven from some true events that I've experienced over the last 10 years. And the name of the book is Journey. And it's about a business executive who is burning out as he's trying to get to the top of his very large company. And just through synchronicity, he ends up in Glastonbury, England, which some of you may know is yes, it's the home of the Glastonbury Music Festival, but it's also has thousands of years of mythical history going back to Jesus Christ and King Arthur and so on. And there, it's kind of a new age village now. He has a soul reading, and that soul reading begins to change his life, and he starts experiencing all kinds of magical and supernatural events, which ultimately cause him to call into question what he's doing in business and navigating between the spiritual and the business world. And it's not a memoir, it is fiction, but certainly drawn from some life experiences I've had as a CEO of a company and as someone who's gone through that experience in Glastonbury.
I was just about to ask you how much of that was memoir and how much of that was fiction. So it's interesting because I know that you've made that journey over there. You've gone there, haven't you?
Yeah.
Based on your bio, again, reading synopsis and bios. So I'm basing things on things I don't actually know. So correct me if I'm wrong. Any of you, please correct me if I'm wrong. But didn't you went over to Glastonbury and did some of these things, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I met through friends. I didn't know anything about Glastonbury other than the music festival. And then they encouraged me to go and to meet with this particular soul reader, which I did. At the time, I was not at all spiritual. I mean, I was a hardcore, executive in a very big company, and now I'm CEO of a big company. So it's not like, but I don't know why I was drawn, and I was drawn in, and she gave me a reading. And actually in that reading, she said that you'll write a book about this journey you're about to start, which I have now. And yeah, it just has had an amazing impact on my life. I've changed dramatically, and people who've read the book or parts of it have also ended up on a pilgrimage to Glastonbury and had their own journeys. So in that way, it's been quite fulfilling, particularly for people who I don't know who have read the book and then send me notes about their experience. So it's not a memoir, but certainly there are pieces of it that are drawn from my own experience there.
I think that's really awesome. I mean, as somebody who enjoys the spiritual awakening journeys and paths of other people, and just going through all of those, different paths of spirituality that people go through to find the way that's right for them and kind of open up their own beings. I love that image of that person kind of taking that step, that journey, and having to go so far to find it as well, and then kind of bringing that back and reevaluating. So what a great story. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we're going to toss it on over now to Kat Hudson.
Hello. Thank
Hi.
you. Hi. Thank you so much for having me as well. I will be one more person to thank you. I'm Katherine Hudson, international bestselling author of the Blue Helix series. It's LGBTQ dystopian sci-fi. As Children and the Unclaimed trilogy, which are both very epic, bloody, gory, dark fantasy. Yes. Most recently, thank you. Most recently, the Accessory to Magic series, and there we go. This one right there. Hey, that's dark, witty, snarky urban fantasy with lots of blood and guts and action, and attitude. Excuse me. This is an apprentice witch with a criminal past inherits a magical bank that can think for itself, and the clientele are almost as dangerous as what's inside their safety deposit boxes. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love that. I kind of picture like a really dark and modern Gringotts that's gone like horribly awry.
You're not the first person to say that, so I guess that's
the only magical bank we know,
Right. Yeah.
We're going to pull from something to identify with. It's going to be Gringotts. But then it all goes terribly wrong. And things are horrifying. Yeah, I love that. And the urban fantasy is something that I write a lot. I write historical, paranormal, mysteries, and it's the history part is always so intriguing to me. But I love reading the more urban fantasies because it's very relatable. There's all those things that are very, very much a part of our daily lives, right. But it's always something that I know my limitations as a writer. I don't know that I could write urban fantasy and be as cool as like the characters need to be. I think I've aged out of cool, and that doesn't work for me anymore. So I tend to step back into history where I don't have to be quite as trendy and cool. So I do love to read them, and I admire the people who could write them so well. So I kind of tossing things out to everybody, and feel free, unmute, and we're just chatting here today. All of what you write, everybody has written something vastly different. And yet it all falls within the sci-fi fantasy realm, whether it is historical, steampunk, more spiritual driven, urban fantasies, and witchcraft, and all these great things. So I guess my first question to you all is sort of, how do you find your niche? How do you find the thing, that element of fantasy that really speaks to you? I mean, Andy, we know you had your experience that really led you, and talk about journey, led you to what it was that you were destined to write. Unfortunately, we don't all have that happen to us. I mean, what a wonderful gift that you were given in that journey. But we don't all have that journey, and we all have to find it somewhere. I mean, I grew up in South Louisiana. New Orleans is, that is my soul place. And so the history and the mystery and the magic of New Orleans speaks to me. And that's what drew me to what I write. But you all have found your path through other ways, other things. So jump on in, whoever wants to share. How did you find that bit of fantasy that speaks most to you?
I'll go.
All right.
I'll break that ice.
Yay.
Honestly, part of it was writing what I wanted to see in books. As a marginalized writer, I wanted to create characters that looked like me, because it took me a long time to find them, just as a reader. And I figured, well, if it's taking me this long to find one, I'd like to create some. And so I sort of carved out my niche. And I'm definitely not the only person doing that, but I carved out my niche with characters who had mental illness, or who had disabilities, or who were queer, and put them then in a fantasy setting or in a science fiction setting, because so much of sci-fi and fantasy for me is creating a world that you want to see or you're afraid of seeing, afraid of ours turning into, as the case may be.
I love that. I love that statement right there. It's a world you want to see, or the world that you are afraid of seeing. What a great way to wrap your head around a great definition of creating a fantasy world. I love that. Keep going though. I love that. I had to stop and comment on that. Once in a while, I'll do that.
that was really, really it, was trying to put them in these worlds that maybe ours could one day be, or take pieces from, and prove not just to my readers, but to myself that I had a place in those worlds. So that was my driving force. It took me a minute really to figure that out, though. Probably at least my first 2 or 3 books before I was like, oh, that's my game. Okay, that's what I'm doing.
I think that is wonderful. And clearly you've been successful in that. So there must be a lot of folks out there looking for those same books that are drawn to what you write. And Kat, I know you have an LGBTQ series as well. And so was that something that, did you have a similar experience in creating that? Was that what drew you to it?
Yes, actually. And excuse me. Yeah, V pretty much covered everything on that realm. And V and I have been, corresponding for many years. Yes, thank you. About this, which was fantastic. It was also incredibly powerful for me to find other authors who are trying to write more inclusive and more representative work within speculative fiction specifically, that incorporated the kinds of characters I wanted to see and the kinds of characters I imagined other people wanted to see as well. And, a little bit of a different bend on that as well is that I am a 10-and-a-half-year-old recovering heroin addict. So what I bring with me into my dark fiction has very much to do with my experiences during my addiction. And I never really fully realized how deeply embedded that personal struggle is. Of course it is within so many works across the board, across all genres. But I didn't become aware of how deeply embedded that was within my characters and within my stories until I wrote The Witching Vault, the first book in my urban fantasy series, which has become far more a part of me and vice versa as I continue to write these books. I had actually only been writing dark fantasy and dystopian sci-fi exclusively with epic fantasy. I'm also a fiction ghostwriter, so I found out. Yes, thank you. I found out after, a bit of time that apparently I had a knack for writing urban fantasy. And then I decided to...
Clearly.
Yeah, thank you. I decided to mesh that with my own work. And I was convinced that I would just be writing this as a fun experiment and, this is what has been making money for my clients. So I'll put my own spin on it and see how that does, with my audience, my readers. There's so much room for still putting the same kind of darkness and morally gray characters and room for, redemption or not, and attitude and danger and so much violence and action and gore and blood in urban fantasy that I ever really expected. And I was able to pull it all together with my own flavor. And it's completely new for me personally under my own name and my own brand, but it's doing far, far better than I ever anticipated. So I'm very happy with that. That's all.
We love those morally gray characters. I love the morally gray ones.
I never let anyone
know
nice.
where they're gonna go. I know, it's like you feel so much of what they are. It's like representative of something that's deeper down inside of us. And I know we've had this conversation on this show before with other authors about we're drawn to the bad guys. And why are we drawn to the bad guys? Because they are putting that dark side of ourselves out there for everybody. They're owning it, they're taking it, and they're doing what they want to do with it, where the rest of us feel like we have to temper that. And the morally gray characters, I feel like we can all identify with so much because, we'd like to all think that we're all good, but are we really? I mean, what justifies us being it's all good? Of course we're not. And so those morally gray characters are fantastic. And I have to say, V and Kat, I'm so glad that you guys are writing books for these marginalized readers. As an English teacher, I teach middle school English, 8th grade English. And so a lot of my students are coming into their own. They're discovering who they are. And as they are seeking out books that represent them, it is so good to see the options for them growing, that we can then point them to characters that are like them. And not necessarily, I mean, we get several books that, we can always recommend that are kids who are coming to that realization of who they are truly. But I love the books that it's not necessarily a discovery book. It's just, these are the characters. They're here and they're off on the same adventures that anybody can go on. This just happens to be who they are. And I love that. I love that they can find those characters that go do those things that they want to do and can get lost in that world with characters that they can identify with. And I love that about what you guys are doing. So to all of those authors who are out there doing that, especially for the young adult audiences in fantasy, which so many of them are drawn to, so many young adults love fantasy. And so to be able to find themselves in characters in the book that are not struggling with who they are, but are confident in who they are and going out and tackling and doing great adventuresome things. Thank you for doing that as a teacher and an English teacher who's often asked to recommend books to these kids. I appreciate that ongoing effort and that embracing by the publishing community to get those books out there for those kids. So thank you. That is my soapbox. I'm going to hop off of it for now, but I had to put that out there because it's something I do feel rather strongly about. So Elizabeth, now you pulled from Sheffield, right? From Yorkshire. So you've got your hometown in there. How did you settle on steampunk in Victorian England?
Well, Sheffield in Yorkshire is a northern industrial town that's based on a steel industry. So growing up, I was surrounded by Victorian architecture and the steelworks. My dad was a steel worker, and I loved it. And also, we were on the edge of gorgeous rolling hills and countryside where there's a whole lot of aristocratic stately homes as well, which is a whole other side of life. And I basically grew up within shouting distance of a whole bunch of rowdy pubs and all that life as well. And the Yorkshire folks themselves have a very dour sense of humor. It's very dry wit. So if you take all that and put it in a great big punch bowl and spin it around and pour it out, then you end up with this, which is kind of a distillation of Sheffield in Yorkshire. And there's even a little map in here of this fantasy version of the town. So it's
I love books with maps. I love it when they do that.
Absolutely. And it's half real and it's half fantasy. And it's everything I wanted Sheffield to be growing up, but almost made it there here and there. But it's just a whole melange of all these things I love. And when I moved to America, I discovered that there was this movement called steampunk, and I found there's a lot of Americans who also love British architecture and senses of humor and all the Victorian clothes and manners and just general nonsense that drove the Victorian age. And I really got into that community as well. So when it came time to actually write my first story, this is the first thing I've ever written, and it turned into a book, which is a whole other crazy tale. But when it came time to write it, I thought, well, let's take everything I love from my childhood. Let's bring all the things in I love from steampunk, and voila, there you have it, the Brass Queen. So I just love it. I still read it myself and laugh. So I think that's a pretty good sign. Either that or I've just got a really bad memory and can't remember what I've written.
No, I think it's a very good sign. And I have to agree with you that there's something about that dry British wit, and combining that with steampunk is perfect. I mean, what a great combination of all of those things. And I love, it's funny, I love the fantasy side of things, but I also am a huge British TV nut. You know, give me my Acorn, give me my BritBox. I'm good to go for a long time. I love British comedies because of the intelligent, dry wit. And, you know, they say the things that you always wish you had thought of to say. Yeah. And I love that they just say it. You know, if somebody's being an idiot, there's a really classy way to tell them that. I mean, here in the Deep South, it's the bless your heart. You know, that is our middle finger to anyone, is just bless your heart. You know, you can say it in church and get away with it. But I love the British wit that is wrapped into the fantasy, and Victorian England. What a great playground with all of the science and just all of those things coming together in steampunk Sheffield. That is fantastic. I absolutely love that. Susie, Randy, we gave you a little bit of a moment. We're going to come back to you since we kind of got a little bit of your journey. We're going to come back to your journey here in a minute, but we're going to get to Susie and then to Randy. We're going to come back down to Andy. So Susie, tell us about how you discovered how you wanted to approach your fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, the Fountain series was, like Elizabeth, the first book that I ever wrote. I was a business executive and then turned author. I wrote the Fountain on maternity leave with my third child. So, you know, just a challenge. And then
first of all,
yeah.
How the heck? And that's not the word I wanted to say, but
third child.
How
right?
do you write a book on maternity leave?
I did lots of things on my maternity leave. I did.
Oh my God, I'm impressed.
So yeah, but at times they're naps. You know, my older two were in preschool by then, so I had some time, and I just was really wanted it. I just really wanted it. But my first series is magical realism. So I really wanted to. I mean, as a young adult, I just really wanted to challenge that idea. I didn't want them to know about magic. I wanted them to not believe, and so that's sort of that. You know, you make a wish. Lots of people have made a wish on a fountain. You don't expect it to come true. But then what if it does? And what if nobody believes you? And so she wishes this girl away and she disappears. And then nobody even believes her that it even happened. And it's awful, right? So you're in high school and like your whole world is crashing around you and you've got nobody, right? And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people feel, that they're not well understood. And so this series is magical realism. But since then, I've really leaned into, I've got a book on submission right now that's a complete fantasy world, and that was different again, to build, you know, not on Earth. And these books are set in New England, and they're set there because I grew up there and went to elementary school there. And when I went to write, I live in Canada now, and when I went to write the series, I tried to set it here, and the woods were wrong, and the trees were wrong, and the buildings weren't old enough, and nothing was right. And I was like, this is not where this series is. It's in Boston, or it's near Boston in New England, which is where I went to school. But then I just love creating fantasy. I love creating the world. I teach about it. I teach writing magic systems. So like I'm super obsessed with like all the different things that you can do. And my agent actually asked me to write.
Class? Wait, hold on.
yeah.
Class on that.
Where's the class?
How do you take the class?
Yeah, so I have lots of things. Right now I'm running a boot camp that's online, and that's not specific to fantasy, but where I teach that, I teach to youth. And then I also teach to adults through Alexander Ritter Center, which is local here in Alberta. So
That's great. Sorry,
I
that
love
was
it.
a total.
No.
I
I know.
I
do
that
also,
was
I love to say I left my job as a business executive about 3 years ago now, and I do all things writing. So I don't necessarily make a living with my books, but I do all the things writing, and I just love being immersed in it, and it's been fantastic. But I was going to say, this year I was asked to write a contemporary novel, just because I had some things in the pipeline already for fantasy. And so I wrote this contemporary novel in the summer, and I had to call my agent and be like, okay, so they're there, and the teens are stranded, and there's been an ice storm, and oh, now there's this phantom ship, and there's this speculative element, and is that okay? She laughed. She was like, can't you just write a contemporary? I'm like, I don't think I can. Because I was like getting bored. I'm like, I need it. I need that imagery, and I want that, I want that challenge to the kids. I love that it challenges their perception of reality. So that's how I came to writing about magic. It's what I write about. I'm obsessed with all things magic, how it all fits together. And I love creating systems that have rules, that don't have rules, and all that stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, I've never had to create a world. Like I said, I write history, and I put the magic and the mystery and the paranormal into the history, but creating a world just seems so intimidating to me that
it's so much
I
fun.
would need class.
But see, so it takes all kinds, because my favorite thing to read is actually historical fiction. But I have zero interest. I have zero interest in doing the research. So I'm going to bow down to you because you're doing the research that I don't want to do. And I'm just making stuff up, which is what I want to do, which is, making up the world.
That's what it takes.
It takes all kinds.
Absolutely. Hey, Kat, if you're talking to V, if they get here, I will let them back in. So I don't know.
I'll let you know if I.
I'm keeping an eye out down here too.
Okay.
So just because I have a feeling that was a dropped connection. So
yeah, I think they might be trying. Yeah, they're trying to get back on. It's fine. I hope they make it. Okay.
I do too. So Randy, now you have got more of the Native American. So here they come. Here they come. There they are.
So sorry, my computer crashed.
No, that's okay. It happens. It happens all the time. This world of Zoom and StreamYard, all these things that we live in, we're used to people popping in and out.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine.
There's lots of spares here, right? You've got lots of spares.
Right. So. Absolutely. So, Randy, tell us about your story and how that came to you, the Native American element of all of that you had. How did that find you, or how did you find it?
I actually, can you hear me? I actually didn't start out to write a novel, but I've always had a fascination for the Native American and their ideas of the spirit world. And I was riding down the road one day, and in my mind, I seen this guy, and I named him Alex Anders. And he revitalized this theater and made it a live performance theater with different acts and all that, And one day he's backstage reading in a travel magazine, and he spots an article about this Indian legend on this lake in upstate New York, and he decides to take a vacation. So I started writing this down. And so I am actually that character, Alex Anders. I traveled to this place. And I didn't do the conventional book form where you already know what your beginning and ending is going to be, which is kind of dangerous because you can paint yourself into a corner. But I just wrote, I went to the cabin and I started writing what I saw with my eyes and what I experienced. So every chapter, every page was new to me as well. I was living it. And fortunately, it ended up with a good ending. And but there's murder, there's mayhem all through the book, and my life is threatened. Got a crooked sheriff in the town, and what I'm experiencing. And I did leave a few openings there for a sequel.
Good.
So I'm going to write some more on that same topic.
I love it. I love the Native American side and that spiritual journey is an interesting setting for fantasy as well, because there's so much that you can explore there and build on there as well, especially as somebody who's discovering that through a journey, through that kind of experiencing it themselves. That's one of the things, talk about research, and we were talking about that before, that we don't all like to create our world. Some of us do an awful lot of research. And for research, for me, I had to actually go experience all of these things, because I feel like I can write it better if I've done it.
Right.
And I think that goes back to the me being terrified of creating it in my own world, because I can't experience that. Like, it's all one meeting. So I love that you did that same thing, writing about your own experiences as well.
And in the book, you have an Indian girl who is the daughter of the medicine man. And most Indian women don't go on spirit quest. That's for men. But since she was his daughter, he allowed her to go on a spirit quest. And what she experienced starts the ball rolling. And she comes back and tells him what she experienced. And he's awestruck. And because it involved a white wolf in her vision, and he explained to her that when she was younger and it was a snowstorm and she wandered off into the snow, and he looked and looked, couldn't find her, sat down by a tree to rest. And here she comes out of the storm being led by a white wolf. And he tells her that's very symbolic, and it goes from there.
The symbolism and that culture too is such a great thing to work with.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
I love it when you can find those deep symbols to work
Right.
with.
Right.
And speaking of symbols and journeys and going through things with experience, we've got two executives here who have gone into novel writing. So between Susie and Andy, we've got some executives changing course a little bit. So Andy, as you embark on this journey is becoming your keyword. I guess, that you're used to that by now. As you're going through, is that an airplane window? Are we looking out the airplane window on the book? I love that.
Yes, it is.
That's awesome. What a great vision of what is inside that book. But as you're embarking now on the journey of you've got this book out here, you're an author and an executive. Susie walked away. Susie said, no, we're going to do all writing things all the time and kids. And
it took me a few years though. It took me a
few years to do that. So Andy, is that something that you see yourself doing? Are you going to kind of walk the path between two worlds?
I'm trying to. I mean, I'm working on a second. It's a trilogy. So the second book is about 2/3 the way through. We hope to have it on the anniversary of this one, but it's not going to happen. But no, I actually think the interesting path is one where you don't have to, your choices. You're in New York City in the business world, where you put on a robe and you go to the top of the tour in Glastonbury. I think that the most interesting journey is one where you can navigate and hold both in the same space, and that's kind of the human challenge. And to tell you the truth, one of the things, because I have to admit, I was thinking originally of writing this with a pseudonym because of because I am CEO of a company and so forth, and there are goddesses and witches and druids and fairies in the book. Now there happen to be these people are also in Glastonbury, so it really blurs between reality and fantasy. But it's not necessarily brand compatible with who I am in the business world. What surprises me, one of the really beautiful surprises for me has been there's so many hidden seekers out there who are afraid to come out of the closet. And then once you give them that opening and that vulnerability and you share that with people, they open up to you. And so I'm amazed how many people in the business community, and I'm thinking particularly of men, with heavy masculine energy that a lot of corporations have, how many of these people are actually in the closet, if you will, of spiritual seeking. And when they have the opportunity to reveal that to you and share that with you, it's quite beautiful. So I have in my business interviews and so forth, I get asked about the book, and I become more and more open about, it's all about vulnerability and authenticity and love. And that actually is becoming the new way of managing in this world, particularly post-pandemic. And actually it resonates with a lot of people. So So, you know, I was originally, you know, frankly, I just thought people would think I'm a little crazy, you know, like a little nuts, because there are things in the book, you know, that are quite, you know, I mean, being, you know, initiated as a druid and stuff like that, or going to a goddess temple, you know, and sitting with the goddesses, you know, that has not been the reaction at all. It's been actually, people are very curious, and it's just, you can feel it in their bones. They are seeking some kind of meaning beyond, you know, numbers and quarters and all the stuff you worry about in the business world. So that's been really fulfilling for me. Maybe, you know, a lot of people are seeking fantasy that we don't realize, that don't look on the outside like they're seeking it at all, you know. But we're all children, right? We're all come from that child, that sort of, that beautiful child kind of experience. And we're always actually seeking to get back to that again. I don't care if you're a 50-year-old CEO of some, you know, Fortune 500 company, you're just a child, you know, who's trying to get back to that state. And, you know, it's fascinating to me.
I was going to ask you how that was received. And I'm so glad that you went into that on your own, because you did it so much more beautifully than I was going to lead you there. But I agree with you. I think the more that we open up about things that we're seeking, and I think especially now we've had so much time more closed in and to ourselves to actually reflect on what's important to us and what we truly want out of life, and kind of where we are, what we truly believe, having to, with so many global events actually forcing us a bit more introspective on what our beliefs are and who we truly are deep down inside. I think there are a lot more people who are willing to have that conversation. I mean, we're becoming, you know, a global society of acceptance in so many ways, and we've drawn so much focus to places where acceptance is not, and then places where it is, and having to figure out how to broaden the good and shrink the bad. That we're aware of all of this, and we're thinking about all of this, and we're all trying to come to that place. And so I think the conversation and being able to have that conversation with all walks of life, whether you are, you know, working at the restaurant down the street, or you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, we're all people seeking the same things. We're seeking understanding, we're seeking acceptance, we're seeking, you know, friendship, love, all of those things that you were referencing. And it doesn't matter what we do during the day, during our 9 to 5, it's all about who we are. And there's a difference in definition there that I think is important. And I love that you specifically mentioned that masculinity, that heavy masculinity, that sometimes is harder to lift out of the way and move out of the way, so that people can truly have that deep conversation that needs to be had about who we are inside. So I think you using that position that you're in and the voice that you have, the platform that you have, is a very good thing for that conversation.
I mean, part of the character in the book and my own journey, you know, Glastonbury has huge feminine energy. You know, it's you have the chalice well with the red water, and you know, it's very feminine, goddess temple and so forth. And so just rebalancing the masculine and feminine energy is part of the story of the journey of this individual. And you know, I just think that's something that the planet's sort of starting to rebalance as well. You know, I just think if you can rebalance a bit, you know, you become a much richer and happier person in life. You know.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, like, I just love, Andy, your story, because I haven't met that many people that did a similar journey. I worked on Wall Street. I was a chief operating officer the last, 10 years. And I see what you said about brand is so true. And it's one of the reasons I chose to write young adult. Now that my kids are older, can read it. And, I write in that genre. It's great. But I chose to write young adult because it wasn't too out there. It was safe choice. I could be an executive and be a mom and also write young adult books and not put myself out there too much. And now I do a little bit more. But I never thought that writing could be a job. I was going to write a book and keep my day job. That was my plan. And after book 2 came out, I started being asked to speak and write and teach and write and tour and do all these things. And I was taking, I think there was April 3 years ago. So 3 years ago this April, my husband and I were comparing calendars, and I was going to take 7 vacation days off in April to go do stuff as an author. And he was like, "What are you doing?" he didn't mean that I was like, "You're right, what am I doing?" He didn't mean quit my day job. That was not his
Right.
plan. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just feel called to do this. And I can see that I'm going to make a living doing this." And so it was a real shock to me. So I'm going to be interested to watch your journey, because the more comfortable, if you can find that balance, terrific. But for me, I didn't find that balance, and the scales tipped, and it was a shock and a surprise and a wonderful one. So good luck.
Thank you. I love my job. That's part of my problem. I love the company. I run Frog Design. It's a very, probably most of you have never heard of it, but it's one of the leading design firms in the world. So, it's a great job. It's a great gig. So that makes it hard, so we'll see.
And then you're choosing between loves, and that's a very difficult place to be.
Yeah.
Tough choice. So I hope that you do find the balance, especially when you love what you do as your day job as well. So, I mean, I have to balance mine. I'm terrible at it. I will be the first to say that when anybody asks me, what is your biggest weakness as a writer? I have to say, actually making the time to do it. Balance. I'm terrible about it. I'm a teacher, so my whole focus is on my students, and I'm an online teacher. So somehow it got misconstrued that online teachers are available 24/7. And so I get emails and weird because, I live in my classroom, and so I must be there all the time. Right. So, it becomes more difficult to balance things, especially being online. You would think that it would give me a lot more time to write. But when I've got a work computer and a personal computer sitting side by side, it's really hard to not answer that kid's email because it's Saturday afternoon and I should be writing. So that balance is actually really difficult for me to find. So I am extremely impressed with people who have managed to find that and do that well. I'm in awe of that and striving for that every single day. That is definitely something that is a weakness for me. Terrible, terrible weakness. Oh, Laura's here. Hi, Laurie. Hi. So yeah, that's your journeys and how you have managed to get to all of these different types of stories and what has spoken to you. They're so individual. And that's one of the things that I love about authors and writing. Everyone has come to their things that speak to them, that allow them to then speak to others through such a personal connection and such a personal way, whether it is the setting that you choose, the characters that you choose, the journeys that you've been on. It's all so personal and yet so universal because it is all a human story, whether it is speculative fiction that's, you're creating your own world and technology and, all of these things, or you're adding a new spiritual twist to a personal journey, or, exploring a culture that, their spirituality is full of deep symbolism and things that you can actually draw from and apply to anyone's life. I love fantasy for that reason, and that it can be so many things to so many different people. And, as a host of the show, I challenge anyone watching, if you are saying, fantasy is not really my thing. Fantasy is so human that it's unbelievable unless you really have gotten into it. And it's so diverse. There's so many different types of fantasy. Please don't ever lump fantasy together and say, I don't like fantasy. I've really struggled to think that is a blanket statement could be true for anyone. You need to find the niche of fantasy that speaks to you because there's so much out there. And I love the diversity in this panel and what you all have written, so that hopefully someone watching that didn't think that fantasy was for them is going, wait a minute, that sounds like something that would speak to me. And I hope that everyone has found something that they can actually explore and decide and change their mind that maybe fantasy is for them. So speaking of fantasy and things, all things history and a little mysterious, we're going to have our New Orleans history and mystery segment here. I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite landmarks in the French Quarter, and that is the Hotel Monteleone. Whenever I go down to New Orleans, I stay in the Garden District. I take the St. Charles Streetcar to Canal, and instead of going straight across from where the streetcar lets me off, which would be Bourbon, I avoid Bourbon. I go up a block and I take Royal Street into the quarter. And I always pass the Hotel Monteleone, and it is absolutely a stunning feature, the jewel of the French Quarter. It was opened in 1886 by a former Italian cobbler, Antonio Monteleone. Since that time, 5 generations of the family have operated the Grand Hotel on Royal in the French Quarter, and they even managed to survive and thrive through Hurricane Katrina, and it is absolutely a stunning place. And it has a literary tie that many people don't realize. Literary guests include Hemingway, Faulkner, Tennessee Williams, John Grisham, Anne Rice, of course, who is a New Orleans resident, Stephen Ambrose, and Truman Capote's mother, who nearly gave birth to him there. Truman Capote often said he was born at the Hotel Monteleone. He was not. His mother's water broke there, but she did manage to actually get to the hospital. And because of its literary tie to all of these authors who have frequented the Hotel Monteleone, there are literary suites that you can stay at. And so if you are a true bibliophile, then you can stay in perhaps this suite right here, which is the Eudora Welty Suite. The hotel's famous carousel bar and lounge featured in her famous short story, The Purple Hat. Tennessee Williams and Ernest Hemingway, who also have suites dedicated to them, both feature the bar in their works, The Rose Tattoo and The Night Before Battle, respectively. Speaking of the carousel bar, here it is, and it actually turns around, or it did at one point. It used to. I haven't been there in a while to see if it still does. So the Monteleone, like many historic French Quarter buildings, can boast not only of numerous TV and film appearances, but also of its many hauntings. The Monteleone actually is very proud of its haunted history and includes stories on their website. So let's talk about some of those hauntings. One locked restaurant door opens and closes by itself every evening between 7 and 8 p.m. An elevator will stop on the wrong floor, leaving confused guests wandering the wrong hallway to find it chilly and with sounds of children playing up and down the hall, but there are no kids there. The elevator will not take you to the 13th floor because there isn't one. The 14th floor is structurally the 13th, but it is not numbered 13. So superstitiously, the Monteleones skipped 13 and went right on to 14. So you can take the elevator to 12 or 14, but not 13. And so the guests of the hotel have reported many paranormal experiences, as have staff members. So in addition to the nightly locked door opening, staff reports that after locking the rooftop deck, lights and music will come on moments later after they are walking away. Of course, the sounds of children playing in the hallways is very frequent. Glass breaking outside of the door and yet opening up to see that no one has indeed dropped a tray full of glass. Thuds with nothing falling over. This will happen inside the rooms as well. Items being moved around the rooms. One guest said that she put her jacket in the middle of her bed, went into the bathroom, came back out, only to find the jacket on the floor. And it was in the middle of the bed, so it certainly didn't slip off by itself. There will be a little girl asking for help. Oh, wait, we skipped the people waking you up. So sometimes the spirits will decide, it's time to get up. And so they will tap you, they will shake you a little bit, or they will command you with wake up. Elevators will stop on the wrong floor, and then, of course, a little girl will ask for help. She'll hold the guest's hand who is taking her to go find that help, only to vanish on the way. Of course, disembodied voices and sounds are also not uncommon. And some say that the ghost of the man who built the grandfather clock in the lobby can be seen working on it during the day. But one of the most famous ghosts is a little boy named Maurice. And Maurice and his parents stayed at the Monteleone. And the parents went to the opera and decided it was not a place for a toddler. And so they left him at the hotel with a nurse. And the little boy got extremely sick, fell sick with a fever, and had a convulsion. So he died of a fever-induced convulsion at the hotel. And his distraught parents would visit the hotel every year on the anniversary of his death, hoping to have some sort of visitation by their child. Eventually, he did come and see his mother, and he told her "Mommy, don't cry, I'm fine." And he was wearing a little striped nightshirt that was typical of the kids in the late 1800s. And so little Maurice still wanders the halls. People will see him every once in a while. Maybe he's still looking for his mom and dad to come back and visit with him. So he is a playful little thing. He will move things around, leave little trinkets in people's rooms, but Maurice is still there. All right, so our Lagniappe segment. Lagniappe is a Louisiana word for a little something extra. So our little something extra tonight is this question. So this path in the forest leads to a mythical creature. What creature do you hope is at the end? Often we think about mythical creatures we want to stay far, far away from, but we're twisting it a little bit here. What creature would you like to find at the end of the path? A mythical creature you wouldn't mind running into. All right, what do you guys think? You have a mythical creature that you would like to find?
Well, I went directly to you said you want to avoid them. I was thinking something small. I want something small, really small, not something challenging, not tonight.
Something you can say, just go ahead, shoot.
Yeah, I'm open to whatever. It could be a very small fierce dragon, very small anything, something that's physically not larger than me tonight.
I like this one. Deborah King. Deborah King is another great author you guys need to check out. She's fantastic, and I love that she's a frequent viewer of the show. Aslan from Narnia. Let's go ahead and let Aslan. Yes, he's a mythical creature I would be happy to see. He's going to take care of things, right? Good answer, Deborah. Small Aslan.
I would love to encounter a leprechaun.
Oh, yes. A little mischievous leprechaun. Perhaps he will lead us to his pot of gold. If nothing else, he'd certainly be fun to see. And small.
The right time of year, the right time of year for it too.
It absolutely is the right time of year. What else? What other things would we like to encounter at the end of our path?
Well, I know I'd love to meet a very friendly dragon who would take me for a ride through the clouds and would help me toast marshmallows and tell me great stories of all the folks who've tried to rob their gold and so on. So I think that would be a good afternoon well spent.
I agree with that one. I have a dragon tattoo. I'm partial to dragons. They're not in any of my books, but I'm partial to dragons and dragon stories. So I'm definitely on board with you there. I think that would be a great one. What other great mythical creatures might we find?
I'd like to find a Kirin, the sort of Japanese, almost like unicorn, one-horned creatures. Sort of like in Princess Mononoke, there's a Kirin-esque forest spirit. I think that'd be fun. Just the imagination and everything behind it. That'd be cool.
That would be very cool. I was thinking a unicorn would be something spectacular to see at the end. So the Kirin absolutely would definitely qualify. Kat, Andy, you got one? Anything in particular you want to see?
I also would say unicorn. What I'd be interested in is if I saw a unicorn, I could see two reactions. One would be awe and like staring at it like a beautiful deer or something. And the other could be joy, that it would bring such joy into your soul. And I'd just be interested in actually meeting a unicorn, what my reaction actually would be, or maybe a little bit of both. But it's such a mythical and sort of up there kind of figure. Yet, what's the experience of being with a unicorn really like?
I can't even imagine. I love the two emotions, and I think that's a very astute analysis of, I think, what most of us would go through, and perhaps shifting between the two many times before settling on one. Is, what is this? First of all, I think the disbelief, the awe, definitely, and then a little bit more of the just wow. That's like, who experiences this? I love unicorns. I think they're absolutely beautiful. And Chris Humphreys, who's going to be on tomorrow night. If you're watching tomorrow, we're going to talk to Chris a little bit about unicorns, because the first book in his fantasy trilogy is The Hunt of the Unicorn. And his trilogy is based off of the unicorn tapestries that are in the Cloisters Museum in New York. So unicorns are Chris's thing. So we'll talk about a little bit more about unicorns tomorrow. Kat, what do you think?
I'm honestly drawing a blank on mythical creatures that have not yet been mentioned.
You
But-
can mention another one. You can jump on somebody's bandwagon. Totally
But
cool.
still, I can't narrow them down, or I can't think of one that like actually gets me going. But I would just be super happy to see like anything that I didn't think existed and have it talk to me and be like, come on, I need you, and you're gonna do this thing with me, and like just forget your regular life. You're the one I need, and then I'd go writing off with whatever
You
it
want a
is.
mythical recruiter.
Yeah,
the cho-
basically.
you're the chosen
I
one.
want some creature to tell me like, yeah, you've been chosen, and you're more special than you already are. So abandon everything you thought was important and like, let's go. That's what I want.
She either wants one mythical recruiter or a menagerie, and they're all flown.
Why not?
Why choose one, Kat? Just take them all. One of each, please. We have things to do. I love it. Well, we are coming close to the end of our time. We're at the end of our time, so I'm going to wrap up a little bit here. So here are, talking about fantasy books. I have to, of course, mention mine. So Crescent City Moon and Crescent City Center, the first two books in the Crescent City series, they are available for you now. And I always say, go read the reviews on Amazon, leave your reviews on Amazon. We enjoy seeing the smiling truck pulling up with all those necessities that we need. But if you're going to buy a book, go to the website of an indie bookstore, support those folks who have struggled so much through this last year, and order your books there, and then go back to the Zon, order your large things of toilet paper, and leave a review for a book that you love. And while we are on the subject of the Crescent City series, of course, it is time for the Crescent City Moon trailer. All right, and thank you so much for checking out the Crescent City series. I hope you guys enjoyed those books. Please drop a review if you do. And speaking of other books that need to be on your list, here are a selection of the books from our authors that were joining us so graciously for this last hour tonight. So please show your support for them as well. Lots of different types of fantasy to choose from. So please dip your toe in the waters of fantasy if you have not ever done that before by checking out all of the different types of fantasy books that are out there. And here are just a few of the selections from our authors. And if you didn't get a chance to catch this show from the very beginning, or if you've missed any past episodes of the Second Line Show, go ahead over to Nola Nash Entertainment on YouTube. That is where all of the past episodes of the Second Line Show live, as well as some special events that we have done. They are over there for you to check out, including things like the all too hilarious dating game that we did not long ago. That was a trip and a half. So go check that out on YouTube as well. Special thanks to all of our authors who joined us tonight. And hopefully you guys will get a chance to check out our day 2 of fantasy authors with even more types of fantasy for you to explore. Again, if you're new to fantasy, this is not something that's ever been on your radar. I encourage you, please, please, please go check out the vast array of books that are out there, all different styles, all different types, lots of different things for each and every reader. Whether you thought fantasy was for you or not, I promise you it is. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us this evening. It has been such a joy to get to meet all 6 of you. So thank you so much for joining us. And all of you guys out there in viewerland, whether you are watching us live right now or watching us later, have a great night. Leave those comments. I'll be checking back in with them soon. Good night, guys.